Welcome to your Tuesday, May 5th edition of Mark Madness. Today we're going to read Mark chapter 9, 14 to 29. And in many ways, this is a familiar scene. It's a scene where somebody with an impure spirit is taken before Jesus. And if we've read the first 8 chapters of the Gospel of Mark, we know that Mark is communicating that Jesus is king and that Jesus has authority. And he has authority over impure spirits. They cannot stand against his power, and he casts them out regularly and easily. So this is a familiar scene in Jesus' ministry. But the emphasis in the Gospel of Mark is different in this scene. Rather than emphasizing Jesus and his power and authority, he's now focusing on a couple of other characters in the scene. First, he's focusing on the disciples. You'll notice that the father of this young boy first approaches the disciples, and the disciples are unable to expel this impure spirit. We saw earlier that Jesus sent his disciples out with a mission, and their mission was to proclaim Jesus, just as Jesus had done, and their mission was to heal in the power of Jesus. And so, them being called upon to do this was exactly what Jesus had asked them to do. But they're unable to do it. They're unable to purge out this impure spirit. And the reason why comes at the end of this narrative. Jesus says that this type of spirit can only come out by prayer. Now, what's interesting about that is in the Gospel of Mark, in this telling of this narrative, Jesus doesn't pray. He just heals the boy. But here Jesus says it can only come out by prayer. This points to a deeper reality that Jesus is speaking of. Jesus is not trying to say that there's one particular prayer that is always going to work. If you say this, you'll cast out demons. That's not the kind of thing that Jesus would say. Because following Jesus is not about remembering the right prayers, remembering the right incantations, saying the right things at the right time, and then getting whatever we want. When Jesus refers to prayer here, he's really talking about a connection with the Father. They could not heal because in some way they were disconnected from the Father. Were they trying to heal on their own strength? Were they trying to serve with their own abilities, somehow being detached from the Father? You remember we've seen in the first half of the Gospel of Mark where Jesus would regularly leave his disciples and go up to a quiet place to pray. And what the prayer was a reconnection with his Father, his reconnection with the one who gave him power for ministry. And so when Jesus refers to prayer here, he's probably talking about something more significant than just the words. It's the connection with the Father. The other emphasis in this narrative is on the boy's father. The boy's father expresses doubt. The boy's father, approaches Jesus and says, if you can heal him, almost hinting at some hesitancy, not fully convinced that Jesus can. And then when Jesus has a strong reply back, the man says, I do believe, help my unbelief. What's beautiful about this scene is that here is a man who responds to Jesus in faith, even though his faith is minimal, even though his faith is imperfect, even though his faith is riddled with doubts and has a lot of growth to do. I think both of these emphases are helpful for us. One, we think we can do things in our own power like the disciples. We think we can serve others in our own power or make Jesus known in our own power or whatever else, but we really need connection with the Father. Our spiritual power comes through connecting with the Father. We shouldn't be surprised when we struggle with some things, but we're completely disconnected from the Father. We shouldn't be surprised when we ignore God all year, but then when we need him, we run to him and expecting him to be there to take care of everything right away. Well, what about the previous 11 months where we completely ignored God and were disconnected from him? God is not simply at our beck and call. We're to have a long-term growing relationship with God the Father. And the second thing is the quality of our faith. Sometimes we get discouraged by our doubts. Sometimes we get discouraged because we say, my faith isn't strong enough. Well, you know what? It's not. And you will have doubts, but it's still pointed in the right direction. It's not the quantity of faith so much, it's the direction it's being pointed. And if it's pointed to Jesus Christ, then that's the right kind of faith. That is saving faith that honors God and brings us closer to Him. So read Mark 9:14 to 29 today with those thoughts in mind.